Up next on the Griot.
Yes, we're all entitled to our opinions and our thoughts, but we should all be rooted in reality. And so when you assault truth, you're getting away from reality. And we can't afford to do that in these times.
Nicole Carr, an award-winning, data-driven investigative journalist. This Winston-Salem State University alum is North Carolina proud. She's a wife, a mother, and most definitely an American.
Welcome to the Griot.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I got to brag about you just a little bit. Nicole Carr, ladies and gentlemen, is fresh off of her third Emmy win.
It's for a compilation of investigative work. So really proud of that, a craft Emmy.
Your vita is amazing. You have covered things like the Charleston, South Carolina church shootings, and then most recently you covered late Congressman John Lewis's homegoing. So you have this breadth of experience at this point. You are officially a vet, still young and beautiful, but you are officially a veteran in the business. So you've come up probably with some old school journalism principles, and then you look at kind of the environment today, particularly this scrutiny in the context of fake news.
There's a difference. Yes, we're all entitled to our opinions and our thoughts, but we should all be rooted in reality. And so when you assault truth, you're getting away from reality. And we can't afford to do that in these times.
You know, when you talk about reality, truth, journalism being the fourth estate, do you have a sense that that's in jeopardy, or is there a way to sort of save it and reaffirm it?
I think it's affirmed in this moment. I think we're going to look back, and hindsight is always 2020, and we're going to say, wow, you know, had it not been for journalists. We'll take this virus, for example, everything we know about timelines, about government action, government inaction, changing of policies, changes of thoughts, influence, whatever's going on, we know this because of journalists. And everything, I think on a very basic level, we have to be a records-based industry. Like you can't say, well, I don't do investigative. I'm a reporter. Well, all reporters, we need to be rooted in some basics that get us to the why of whatever we're seeing in front of us. And the best way to do that is to uncover records, to filter through things, to show how we got from point A to point B. So we've got a lot of attacks on different fronts, but our jobs don't change. And part of the reason the public reacts to news the way they do is because media as an industry confused the consumer. I'll just take television, for example. You go from the inception of 24-hour news. Well, what happens when you put on news for 24 hours? You don't want it on a loop, so you add some opinion. But do you label it properly? Do people understand that the person speaking now is no longer a journalist, but they're weighing in as an expert, as a commentator, thought leader? People started using this term. I always say, well, what is the media? What are you talking about? The media. And right now it's anything you hate about the industry. But there's a lot of noise and a lot of it's not journalism, but there still is a lot of good, solid journalism happening right now. So the consumer doesn't even know what to label what we do. And that's our fault.
Please, Nicole Carr, journalist extraordinaire, please tell us what your historical moment is.
So I am going to take this back to something I haven't shared a whole lot with anyone outside of my family because we're still sorting through this. But 2 years ago, we took a family trip. It's to the African American Cultural Museum. In the past 2 years, because of that visit, I've been able to track records on my great-grandfather, who was a chief medical officer at the Port Antonio, Jamaica hospital and learned that he was a part of the British West Indies Regiment in World War I. He went to Howard after Great Britain didn't live up to their promise of promotions and money and land and all kinds of things for these West Indian volunteer enlisted soldiers, essentially. But it's relevant to today because if you read their yearbooks and you read some of the things, even with Ida B. Wells and what they were going through, there were epidemics. There were yellow fever. We know, 1918, the flu, the pandemic. And I think about them in these moments and coming, in post-slavery, just the first generation post-slavery and what they were doing. And I'm like, if they could build these foundations and move on and do what they did in that moment in time, we are in a moment in time where we were going to come out of this, but what we do in this moment will impact us for generations. We're right now having a conversation about the need for more Black doctors to understand our bodies and all of this and the health inequities and all of this. And he was literally on the front lines in 1925 coming out of medical school. They had the same concerns. And Howard was teaching and committed to bringing up another generation of Black doctors to deal with some of the same things that our communities are dealing with. I'm like, my God, I'm a product of greatness. To the intellect that the same intellect we need to apply to this time, our ancestors did, and that we are truly moving in the spirit of our ancestors. And so I'm just thinking, like, he's in this medical field, and the way that his great granddaughter is tracking him is through journalistic, through records. And I can see how they applied their schooling or whatever they were going through to situations that are parallel to what we're going through in this time.
Here's what I take from that. On one hand, you can look at it and say, wow, we're still fighting some of these same battles.
Yep.
These same issues continue to come up decade after decade, century after century, right? But what you so eloquently pointed out is we still have to see the progress in it, that there's actual progress. We know more now than we did know 100 years ago. As Black people, we're not a monolithic people. Our experiences are as varied as our skin tones. Mm-hmm. And we all cope and mitigate in different ways based on our life experiences and how we've been brought up and how we choose to survive. I'm fine with however the individual needs to do that. But what I'm not okay with is dismissing history, dismissing patterns, dismissing data. That I'm not good with at all. So, you bring up an important point that there's still more work to be done. There will be more work to be done.